I moved to the US with two suitcases, my parents' retirement money, bulk load of aspirations, but I was absolutely clueless how to make my life. I didn't know what I needed to do to take the next steps in my life. This may be an externally induced phenomenon in your life, but this is your internal fight. This is a you versus you situation. And if there is anybody who will untangle this for you, is going to be yourself.
Hey, I'm Hannah Bloking, and I am here with 4 Under 3 for another amazing episode of Imposter Talks. My partner, Allison, is not here today, and she is so sad because we have one of the most exciting guests that we've had the opportunity to talk to together. We both have had an amazing experience with our guest today. So today we're here to talk to Twisha Shaw, who we had the amazing opportunity to work with because we met through common connections through ServiceNow and through our common network. And Twisha reached out because she is a leader at ServiceNow and does amazing work to support the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives at ServiceNow. And she worked with us to put together just the most fabulous experience for women in her team, employees in her team, to help them really think about ways that they could battle their imposter and do their best work. So without further ado, really wanted to just introduce our fabulous guest, Twisha. Hi, thank you so much for joining.
Hi, Hannah. Thank you for having me.
It is so my pleasure. So just for the benefit of the audience, can you talk a little bit about your background, who you are, maybe a little bit about your experience getting to know me and Allison throughout the past couple of months?
100%. Before anything else, I identify myself as a strong, fiercely independent woman, somebody who's duly committed to my responsibilities as a mother, as a human, as a partner to my husband, as a working professional. I have this very quaint journey. I started off my real life journey when I moved from India. I finished my bachelor's degree, where I lived a very protected, a very shielded life, where I was completely oblivious to all real life responsibilities. And then when I moved to the US with two suitcases, my parents' retirement money, bulk load of aspirations, but I was absolutely clueless how to make my life. I didn't know what I needed to do to take the next steps in my life. I started off with doing minimum wage jobs. I was a bank teller for about a year. I did a weekend job as a bridal specialist. And I also was a help desk agent before I got my first breakthrough in my career, which was more aligned to my education, where I spent 4 years of my life trying to study something and become somebody. And that's when I found Vistex. That's the company where I had a 15-year stint. That was a startup company. I progressed through many different roles in that company. I learned a lot of skills that I used up until today. And as I progressed through those roles, I stood out in what I did, not just because I was good at what I did, but most often I was the shortest person in the room. I was the youngest person in the room. And I was also several times the only woman in the room. And so that helped me grow in several different ways through my experiences. Once I finished that 15-year stint, it dawned on me that I've been here too long and I wanted to take a leap of faith on myself. I wanted to spread my wings and I wanted to basically find a world outside of Vistex. And so I joined another company for a year before I embarked on my ServiceNow journey. Which I find extremely fulfilling and challenging at the same time because I'm completely out of my comfort zone and I'm learning so many new things. But at the same time, I'm able to transfer a lot of the skills that I learned as an early part in my career. But also feel like besides my career, I love giving back to the community. And so as a result, this year, I am the AMS chair for the Women at ServiceNow, which is our employee belonging group. I absolutely love it because I'm so passionate about helping other women. I have 2 daughters, and I want to make sure they're stepping into a world where this gender bias is not really a thing anymore. And so I want to be a part of that change right now. But keeping my career aside for a second, I feel like over the years, I just grew largely as a human, as a woman, as a parent. And oftentimes, I feel like those titles are more rewarding to me than the titles that I have at work. So that's me in a nutshell.
That is such an inspiring story, something that I personally relate to a lot as well. And certainly just hearing that journey of you packing up 2 suitcases, moving to a completely different country, and really starting from the beginning and having to navigate all those things professionally, in addition to becoming a wife, becoming a mother. I know you just moved, across the country.
That's right.
So yeah, and so many experiences, and I've had, of course, the luxury of meeting you when you're already at the pinnacle of these things, and you're leading these initiatives at ServiceNow, and they're just so fascinating and wonderful to see such a strong leadership quality that you're exuding. Maybe just taking a step back, we're here to talk about imposter syndrome. Wow, so many things that you've navigated throughout your life, and starting from that point where you were there, was a bridal specialist was your first, or a bank teller was your first role. Okay, all right, so feels like a journey that may be ripe for imposter syndrome. So maybe just starting out from the beginning, what does imposter syndrome mean to you?
Yeah, I think imposter syndrome, I think, is a very newish, recentish term. But this syndrome has been here for years, has been here for decades. And when we spoke about in our workshop, Hannah, we said that this is something that's gender agnostic, it's age agnostic, and every person feels it in some shape or form. And to me, when I didn't even know that a term like this existed, to me, it was this very fake, cynical version of me that lived inside of me. And I equated it to this annoying voice that kept telling me that I'm not good enough, that you're not doing as much as other people are doing. And it was this constant reminder about all the things that I couldn't do in life or I'm not good at. So to me, that imposter was the opposite of what a cheerleader would do. It's something that would keep bringing you down, keep bringing those feelings of you're so diminishing as a person. And of course, there have been several experiences in my life that have showed me that this syndrome exists, but also those experiences have taught me how you tackle the syndrome and what you do to squash that imposter every time it shows up.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And I love that when we had this workshop and when you guys threw out some stats in terms of this is what imposter syndrome is, and just that connection that we got from everybody in the audience saying, yes, like we feel it too, day in, day out. And I think that was just so resonating with everybody, the way you guys put together those stats, the way you presented it, the way you carried out that workshop where people resonated that I'm not alone in this journey.
Ah, that makes my heart so happy. Allison's going to be so excited to hear
Yeah.
that. And just the pure energy in that workshop and the feeling of community. But again, like going back to how you were a leader that really facilitated, that just showed so much about your skills as a leader in
Thank
driving that
you.
type of community. Yeah, no, it was amazing to see. And something that you just said that is so funny because we talked to a lot of different people, different points in their career about imposter syndrome, but you're the first person that's used this imagery of anti cheerleader, which I think is like really great. I think it's really helpful because it helps to separate out this imposter voice. What is it? It's like the anti cheerleader.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so that's super, super interesting. And like you've navigated a lot, but really helpful imagery about what imposter syndrome is. But can you maybe talk about a time? It could be maybe more recent in your role as a senior leader at ServiceNow, it could be maybe more at the beginning of your career that you truly felt like an imposter and how you navigated that situation.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you this, I've had countless occasions when I've had imposter syndrome. And like I said, even when it wasn't a real term, right from my childhood days, I was this dark skinned, bespectacled, nerdy looking kid, all the way up until the last few months when I felt like I'm just not doing enough. I'm just not good enough. And every situation is a little bit different. And I'll talk about the different phases in my life. But what I will tell you is one commonality or two commonalities that I draw from all of these different situations, which I introspect a lot of times in my life and where I feel like I can improve is one is I used to compare myself to people. And second is I was trying to be somebody who I'm just not. But I was that person because people wanted me to be that way. And that's when that imposter was feeding onto those feelings of mine. So I know that those are two things that I absolutely try to avoid when I feel like this imposter is creeping up. So I know we're looking at a specific situation, but maybe let me just go through this series of phases in my life. So, like I said, when I was a child, I was a target for bullies because I was dark skinned. I was the ugly duckling. And it was just constant barrage of, you're not good enough, you don't look good enough. But as I was navigating my tween years, there were so many other things that I was good at that other people were not good at. And things like debates, things like doing drama, things like getting up on stage and being able to do things. I drew my confidence from things like this. Even though I didn't do well, people valued the other qualities that I had. And that made me understand that maybe my looks are just not everything. They don't define me. And I think that was really important because I was a child. And for me to have that realization at that point was super important for me for how I navigated the way I looked for the rest of my life. As I became a young adult, I saw people around me thinking about their ambitions, thinking about their career journeys and what they're going to do. And I wasn't too sure about what I'm going to do in my life. But there again, there's that self-realization that creeped in where it told me that, hey, not everybody leads their life in the same way. And it's okay if you don't have your life path chalked out right now. Somebody else is doing something else, you don't have to do it. So that's where the comparison, like where, hey, it's okay if you don't compare yourself to everybody else. Try and figure out what you are able to do and what you like to do. And then came in when I was a young professional, where I worked in this very high intense environment with very skilled, very experienced people. I was put in this environment as a startup culture is where there were people who had enormous years of experience than I did. And when I walked into the room, like I said, being the only woman, being the youngest, being the shortest, which sometimes I'm still like, why am I so short? Which sometimes is an imposter.
I can relate to that. We haven't met in person, but I'm 5'1", so I can relate to that.
We'll be twins in that manner.
Yeah,
I'm
perfect.
5'1" too.
I can relate to all of this. Yes.
Yes. But what I did realize over time, while I was comparing my skills with them, and one day I had to be like, Twisha, you're not comparing the right skills. You bring so much more to the table than they do with all of their wisdom and years of experience. And so value yourself for what you bring to the table. And so those were some experiences where, as a young professional, I learned that. And then also as recent as just being a mother. And I'm sure every mother asks herself this question is, am I really a good mother? Am I really doing everything that I need to do? Because I saw other mothers doing things for their children or things with their children that I wasn't doing, that maybe I didn't have the time or the facilities to be able to do that. And that always raised the question for me is, are you doing all the right things as a mother? But then again, I looked back, I introspected, and I was like, I have unique children. And my children may not want to do the same things or do not like the same things as some of the other children do. And so I'm going to raise my children for who they are and for the mother that I am, and not comparing myself to what all the other women do. Also, when I joined ServiceNow, I actually took a drop in my titles. I was a senior director, I was a program director in my previous roles. I took a drop in my title. Did that create imposter syndrome? It probably did for a little bit, but I was coming from the post-sales implementation world into a pre-sales solution engineering role. And what I told to myself is, think about it as that you're just navigating a newer journey. And if you do well in this journey by using all the skills that you've learned in the past, that's a good testament for yourself, despite the titles that you had, that you are good enough. And I am navigating that journey and squashing that imposter syndrome every time that it comes up, because I do have to keep reminding myself that it's a journey, it's not the destination, right? And it's things like this that creep up every single day when you're navigating all these different roles that you play as a person.
Oh, so said, and completely relate with the journey and not the destination. And certainly something that I think that as you've been in the workforce for 15 years, you truly realize that growth isn't always linear. Like sometimes you have to take some paths that are straight across to get to where you want to go. So like totally so relate to all of that, and really good advice for people that are thinking about what they want to do next and different ways that they can achieve their goals using their unique backgrounds and skills. But one thing that you just said that really resonated with me too, and I don't know if you remember from the workshop, but we talked about the bullies and how that really is tightly coupled with the imposter syndrome that you felt throughout your adult life also.
Mhm.
So I relate to that. And one of the things that Alice and I always talk about in our imposter syndrome workshops is like when we're faced with a new professional challenge or a new personal challenge, like becoming a mother for the first time, it's like you become that awkward 13-year-old who is getting made fun of for whatever thing, like you're wearing glasses or your hair. I was made fun of for my hair when I was a teenager. Whatever it is, you're that awkward person that doesn't have the same skills that you have as an adult. So maybe as a last following thought, the people that are listening right now and they have that middle school kid in their head who's listening
Mhm.
to the bullies and listening to that negative feedback, like what is your one piece of advice for them to help them get through that moment that they're feeling like their 13-year-old self?
Absolutely. And what I will tell you based on the way I look at imposter syndrome is this may be an externally induced phenomenon in your life, but this is your internal fight. This is a you versus you situation. And if there is anybody who will untangle this for you, is going to be yourself. Maybe with the help of a therapist, but this is something you will need to do. What I have used in the past, which has worked really well for me for where I have come today to be able to combat this syndrome every time it comes up, is I use these three self tactics. And one of them is self awareness. Second is self compassion. And the third one is self recognition. And the way I break this down, even for myself at times, is self awareness is sit down and get to know yourself. You don't have to pass judgments on other people. Get to know things that you're really good at and things that you're not so good at. Because when people will pass judgments at you, if it's a good judgment, you'll be like, yep, I knew that. I knew I was really good at that. And if they pass a bad judgment and it was one of those things that you knew that you weren't really good at, you'll be like, yeah, that was right. I'm not good at that. I need to get better at that.
Mhm.
But if they pass a judgment on you on something that you're really good at, that's the things that you just ignore and be like, whatever. I know I'm really good at that. I've had experiences where I know I'm really good at it and I've been valued for that. So that's one tool that I've put in my bag where I say, just get to know yourself really well. Second thing is the self compassion. There are several times when you have to just love yourself, give yourself that grace. And this is something I'm still working on. But it's very important that when then nobody else is showing you that love, is that you stand up for yourself and show yourself the love. I keep joking that this is a tool that I will use when I have two teenage daughters yelling at me saying, Mom, we hate you. I think that's when I'm going to use this self compassion and be like, Twisha, it's okay. Like you love yourself. It's fine. And I think this is where sometimes I often hear people telling me, sometimes there are people that I mentor, people that I'm talking to, who talk about being self critical. And I think it's great for you to be self critical at up to a certain point, but be that somebody who's also appreciating yourself. And you will not be able to stand up to other people if you can't stand up for yourself. And the third one is self recognition. I think there are several times when you will just have to pat yourself in the back and just say, even though the outcome wasn't good, you gave it your best. Like you gave it your all. And yes, it may not have been a positive outcome, but you try to do everything that you can. And sometimes I feel like we just get so beaten down when the outcomes aren't great that we forget to recognize that you actually did everything that you could. So those are the three tactics that I use. And what I do for that is I sometimes do a lot of mirror talk. So I'll talk to myself in the mirror, I'll look at myself in the eye, and I'll talk to myself about, yes, it's okay. You learned something from here, but you gave your best for this. And then sometimes I'll take a blank piece of paper and then I'll just write words on it. So it's not journaling, but I'll just write words saying you did it or you did a good job, or you tried your best, or you are enough. And then once I write it 15 times, I think it's ingrained in my brain. Okay, you did fine. It's okay.
I love all of that so much. And I'm looking at the sticky notes on my desk right now, and I'm like going to write that on my sticky notes and put them all over my desk today. This was such an amazing conversation. Twisha, you are such an inspiration. We are so grateful to have met you and have gotten the opportunity to work with you and learn more about the work that you're doing at ServiceNow. Really loved having you. Okay, so everyone who's listening, if you have any questions for Twisha, please comment below. We're available on all the podcasts, Spotify, Apple. Thank you so much, Twisha. It was great to have you.
Thank you so much. I love the work that you guys are doing, and continue to keep squashing that imposter syndrome.
No, literally going to do the 3 things that you just talked about today. We're going to squash it. Thank you so much, Twisha.
Awesome. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Imposter Talks.
Subscribe and review our podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And please follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube at 4under3.
And we want to hear your imposter story. If you're interested in being a guest, please email us at info@4under3.io. Thanks so much.